Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? Well, we've been spending some time with some DC books recently, and some post-crisis DC books in particular. Might as well keep it going. We're taking a look today at Tim Truman's Hawkworld, #1. So just before we get into it, if you enjoy the channel, if you feel like you might want to help out a little bit, go subscribe on my Patreon. Links are in the description, gives you early access to everything I do. Helps out the channel, helps to buy new comics. So last week we took a look at Superman #1, which was John Byrne's reimagining of the character, which is something DC did an awful lot of after Crisis on Infinite Earths. Like, they really invested in overhauling their entire line, which was not something I was really aware of. Like, a lot of books got first issues, or failing that, they got like 3 or 6 issue limited series that got parlayed into first issues. So you got stuff like Man of Steel by John Byrne being parlayed into Superman #1. You got Year One on Batman as like a reboot of the entire origin, really. You got George Perez on Wonder Woman. You got Green Lantern and Emerald Dawn. You also got Mike Grell redoing Green Arrow on the Longbow Hunters. And of course, there was Hawkman. Hawkman was a character who, was around forever, but had fallen out of favor because it's kind of a goofy character. As honestly, most of DC's characters kind of are. You got this alien who's a human, except for the fact that he has bird wings. Have they addressed the fact that Hawkman's bones would need to be hollow? And even then, there's like no chance that he's any kind of aerodynamic? Anyway, doesn't matter. So for a couple of years after Crisis on Infinite Earths, the character kind of languished a little bit with nobody really knowing what they wanted to do with him. But eventually the editors at DC decided to give Tim Truman a crack at reimagining the Hawkman story as sort of a police procedural with strong elements of like class warfare. This holds up an awful lot with the kind of stuff that was going on at DC at the time, which, yeah, it was in the wake of Crisis on Infinite Earths, but it was also in the wake of stuff like Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns, which kind of influenced an awful lot of comics to become, more, trying to be more realistic. Going for that grittier feel, even when your guy is an alien with wings called Hawkman. And you can argue whether or not that was ever a good idea. I mean, I think it's still a problem that plagues comics these days, where everything has to have some element of realism in it. And then, you've got some dude running around in long johns punching muggers, or punching supervillains, whichever. It's inherently kind of dumb, but, that's not what we're talking about today anyway. We're talking about Hawkworld, so why don't we just get into it? We can start with the cover here. It's a pretty strong cover. Tim Truman's style often reminds me an awful lot of Mike Grell. It mostly down to the kind of rendering they use. That said, one of the main differences, I think, is that Mike Grell has a wild gift for composition that, as far as I can tell, Tim Truman doesn't quite have, which is nothing on Tim Truman. So, for the cover on this, we get a shot of our guy. It's a big hero shot, at least. It is on a bit of a flat angle. There's a bit of a worm's eye view going on, at least. But he's not trying for anything particularly special with the layouts in particular. So he's just going to make sure that the character looks as good as he can make it. And it's pretty good. I mean, I imagine this looks like it's painted. And the color usage in this is, I like this quite a bit, actually. And it's something that would have been a little bit different at the time. Particularly for a DC superhero comic, right? But I like his kit. It's very functional. It has to keep in some elements of the original character. So he's got, the crossed bands across his chest. He's got like the weird, eggs on his arms. And of course the wings. And he has, like the cowl essentially, but the cowl is more of a helmet, for a police officer in this case. So let's get into this one. So this is Flash Zone. The credits on this are interesting. Timothy Truman, storyteller, which in this case means writer/penciler. Inks by Alcatena. I don't remember his first name, unfortunately. Color artist Sam Parsons. Tim Harkins doing the lettering. And I mean, you can see in the bit of panel that's been taken from the book here, there's going to be parts in this where Tim Truman is going to go overboard with the detail. And I'm absolutely all in on that. All right. So starting things off, we're going to get a slow build lead-in, kind of working our way into the world of Thanagar. And we're going to get some thematic narration to lead us in. Basically talking from the perspective of Perrin Qatar, which is Hawkman's father, and is a luminary in the Thanagarian society. Talking about how they've encountered all sorts of worlds, and how every world they go to, if the conditions are right for a specific kind of life, specifically avian, then generally speaking, birds usually share most traits with each other. It's like, okay, that's something. Cool looking art, though. It's that kind of sketchbook stuff that I noted in Mike Grell's when he was doing Shaman's Tears, where it feels like people doing studies of wildlife. Good looking stuff. I like this shot in particular here, like really nice lighting. And this, of course, is just a lead in to Thanagarian societies as the bird gets trapped by some sort of lizard guy. And we see that this all took place on the arm of a statue. This is a Thanagarian hero. We're going to get introduced to him later, which is good because I don't remember his name right now. This is in some kind of downtown in Downside, which is where the dregs of society go to. Very nice shot to open up, giving us a pretty good idea of what things look like on the ground level. And the lizard guy here who's eating the hawk, he seems like he's at least partially intelligent. You know, he's intelligent enough to wear clothes, but he's still chowing down on this hawk because I'm pretty sure this is because the people of Downside are unimaginably poor. So, you know, finding like free-range food is probably a bit of a gift. But he's going to go scarpering. Everybody is going to go scarpering when they hear a helicopter, essentially, coming out. Like that's a straight-up helicopter. It looks like a modified Hind or something. And that's like a troop transport as the Thanagarian police force moves in. Great looking shot. Looks like it's, taken probably straight from a photo and then altered slightly. But the thing looks awesome. Looks like appropriately cumbersome. Like this looks a little unlikely in the back here, the troop transport part. But you can totally see an aircraft actually doing that. Looks wild. Another great shot here of it going past the statue, kind of giving a sense of size. Actually, that feels like it's way too small given how big the guy on his arm was. Again, given that the rotors are in front of the head here. Anyway, still a great looking shot. Doesn't matter. Anyway, the point is that the Thanagarian police force is flying in and it terrifies all of the lower classes. They've got a new recruit with them this time on his first mission. This is Qatar Hall, and we find out pretty quickly that Qatar is a history buff. He's familiar with what the statue is. It's one of the old Thanagarian heroes who he has a medallion of around his neck. And you can see right from the beginning here, the Hawkman uniforms are much more militaristic in this because we're going for more of a grounded feel. So yeah, they're going to go make their entry. One of Qatar's platoon mates down some pills before he goes down. This is kind of common with Thanagarian culture at this time, apparently. So they're doing like a complete overhaul where Thanagar is like this imperialist culture that has conquered all sorts of other worlds, enslaved all sorts of races, and are constantly importing cultural influences, as well as importing their drugs. So they're going to touch down. You know, they don't do a parachute drop naturally. They've all got their wings. So they just go launching themselves out of the helicopter here. And Tim Truman's going to try and keep it kind of strategic. You know, flankers in a position, stay put until Commander Bythe's formation gets here. And they just want like suppressing fire until their commander is on the scene. Commander shows up, just, floats in, which is fun. And Tim Truman is always taking care to keep track of the shadows, particularly with the wings, it feels like. The guy they're here for has a young child as a hostage, but Commander doesn't give a shit because people from the upper city don't care about what happens to people from the lower city. So immediately just launches a grenade into the window where that particular guy is, and then orders a general advance. And, we get some moody shots of the police force moving in. It's pretty great looking stuff. And again, going for much more of a grounded feel. So yeah, they're moving through the slum here. This looks like something out of Judge Dredd, where they're going from door to door, kicking them open, and they find the guy they're looking for. And Qatar's buddy here immediately shoots him, even though he's still got his little girl hostage. So I guess he didn't get hit by the grenade. But again, going for that really moody feel with the heavy shadows. The helmet's an interesting thing to deal with because you got to have those bulbous Hawkman eyes in there, right? That's like an essential part of the character, I guess. I don't really see why it needs to be, but apparently it is. So the bulbous eyes are like part of the helmet. And then they've got goggles over those because eventually they do take the helmets off and they've got just like regular people eyes. So Qatar goes on into the next room where it turns out the guy they were hunting, he had a whole bunch of little kids that either he was protecting or who knows why he had them. I think it is most likely that he was protecting them actually in this case. Qatar's maid here tells Qatar, stick around. I'm going to take a look around. While he's looking after them, he notices something weird about the wall and tears at it. And what he finds is a weapons cache. His commander is kind of grudgingly accepting of the fact that Qatar did something right on his first trip. But they're not going to talk about that too much. What they are going to talk about is the fact that Qatar is from the upper city. He's an aristocrat. Doesn't need to be here. His dad is, one of the leading lights of Thanagarian society. He could have very easily found a cushy office job and had a very comfortable life. But instead, he's decided to join up with the Corps, theoretically, I'm sure, to inspire people and try to protect people. But it quickly becomes clear, I think, that the force he's joined is just this jackboot army. And what it's actually giving him is a view to just what exactly goes on in Downside. Again, great use of shadows going on here. Like I said, Tim Truman doesn't have, Mike Grell's touch with composition, but he's not bad at all at picking out panel designs. Like, he's finding some interesting angles all over the place here, which is pretty great. So we end with the commander pulling a rifle on Qatar. And, basically he doesn't like Qatar. He thinks he's this, silver spoon, trust fund baby who's just, slumming it. He's a tourist. And, keeps him in his sights for a long second. Qatar doesn't flinch and even pulls the trigger. But either he's got the safety on or there's no ammo in the mag at the moment. And they just kind of wander back to the helicopter after that, like nothing happened. Although Qatar is maybe a little bit more disillusioned now. And yeah, we get him taking off his helmet. He's just like a regular-ass dude. Where's your bulbous eyes? Here's some of those shots, like the crowd shots of all the downsiders. Again, ton of detail and trying to come up with different looks for the different kind of aliens. That's pretty good. So yeah, on the trip back up, Qatar is pretty shaken by what he's seen. And his buddy Krager here offers him again another pill. Because, you can't do this job without being heavily medicated, apparently. And then we get a pretty big contrast between the lower city and where Qatar, spends most of his time, in the upper city. Where it's all like city in the clouds, gorgeous gardens, just like lap of luxury stuff. Gets into his apartment, finds out that his dad has taken the liberty of inviting him to a party, which is something that he can't really refuse. And even had his fancy aristocrat suit pressed. Isn't that nice of him? And Tim Truman's going out of his way to do quite a bit of detail all over the backgrounds here. Not always getting striking images, but there's a constant sense of just effort going on in this book. And Qatar finally decides to just kind of give in, takes the pill that he got given by Krager, and goes to hell with it. I have to go. I might as well be flying. Cut from there to the party itself as Qatar enters. And again, tons of detail going on. Pretty imaginative looking outfits that Tim Truman has come up with for the different partygoers as well as for the servants, who are all slaves that have been captured from different worlds. Qatar spots his dad, so naturally that's where he's going to be spending most of the night. And his dad is sitting around with other dignitaries who are just the worst kind of like upper crust aristocracy types, just making pointless chit-chat, bragging about what new luxury good they've acquired. They talk a little bit about the fact that Qatar, hasn't availed himself of a cushy position where he very clearly could have. But they do the thing, where it's like, oh, that's very commendable. Where there's all sorts of room for advancement in the Corps if you know the right people. Which Qatar obviously does. And there's a setup going on between Qatar and one of the administrator's daughters. And, she's all glammed out. She's got the red hair going on. I think we're meant to think, is this Hawkgirl or Hawkwoman, whichever she is at the time? And it's not. Her name is Shiera. But they're going to go have a dance anyway. They're going to chat it up. It doesn't really seem like Qatar is particularly interested in her, but given their positions in the aristocracy, it makes sense for them to hook up. And as they're dancing, they're just kind of talking about, just kind of continuing their conversation from earlier in the night. Qatar doesn't like the fact that Thanagar doesn't really produce anything anymore. It just imports everything. And, he's a proud Thanagarian, and as far as he's concerned, Thanagar has this rich history, which he's extremely interested in, and which no other aristocrat seems to be. They want to be bringing in luxury goods from all sorts of new conquered planets, as well as new slaves, new drugs, the whole deal. And while they're dancing, one of the slave servers accidentally bumps into Shiera, and Shiera loses her goddamn mind. Just screaming at him, how dare you, do you know who I am? This gown could keep your filthy little family eating for the rest of your miserable, illiterate lives. Qatar's like, we got to get out of here. She's like, no, not until this stinking insect bleeds. Like, this obviously isn't meant to be Hawkgirl because this isn't meant to be anybody we're supposed to sympathize with at any point. And her outburst isn't really noticed other than just, oh, what did this stupid servant do? Like, this is the way an aristocrat is meant to act in Thanagarian society, which is another thing Qatar is not fond of. So then we're going to have a discussion between the three administrators here, Qatar's dad being one of them. And up until now, we haven't really had much reason to kind of root for Qatar's dad. He doesn't seem necessarily as bad as the other two. The other two just seem like the worst friggin' people you've ever heard of. Qatar's father just seems to be kind of, oblivious and caught up in the Thanagarian lifestyle. But as the conversation progresses, you get the impression that Qatar's father is actually on the side of the downsiders. And he's trying to advocate for them, but he's doing it, much more subtly than Qatar has been able to do so far. All right, so next we're going to cut to Qatar's next mission. They're going back to Downside. He's with Krager again. Krager seems to be sort of his partner. Krager keeps offering him drugs, which Qatar, still isn't taking, but, he is more open to taking them now. And what they're here for today is they're investigating the weapons cache that they found yesterday, where they're trying to find a trail to find out who exactly has been finding all these weapons and what are they planning to do with them. So we get this one downsider here who you get the feeling is meant to be, he's kind of like a snitch, like just a regular contact for the Thanagarian police forces. And at the sight of Krager, he takes off running. Qatar goes to cut him off, and the snitch slams past him, but that counts as assault, which gives Krager an excuse to shoot him in the leg. So, we're using brutal police tactics here. And now they're going to have a bit of an interrogation, where did the weapons come from? Who ordered them? Where are they going? But this is starting to attract too much attention from other downsiders who have their own weapons. So, they're in on the whole thing. It also gives you more people to question, at least. Qatar and Krager take some cover. The snitch takes a shot immediately, taking him out of the picture. And they start cutting down the attackers. But Krager takes a round in the chest, and he's killed pretty much immediately. Again, just, more disillusioning type stuff for Qatar. Qatar checks to make sure that he's dead. Really nice looking shot here. And then carries him back to the helicopter. Meanwhile, they're being watched by whoever's organized all of this. Because he says, give this to Jarl and his boys, tell them it was a messy job. So, meaning the guys who shot at Qatar and Krager. Picks up, theoretically, what he came down here for, which seems to be a case full of drugs and money. And ends by putting on his Hawkman helmet. So I believe this is Bythe, who is the commander for Qatar's particular squad. So we've got government corruption, class warfare stuff, probably not what most people anticipated at the time in 1989 when this was released on the shelves. Like these days, this is nothing to even blink at. You get this in like every other issue. But in 1989, this was completely different and very eye-catching. So, okay, from there, we're going to cut to this remote island where Qatar is with the aristocrat who was at the party the other night and his daughter, Shayera, and they're on a hunting expedition. The administrator makes a big deal about the fancy rifle he got from Cygnus 4. Qatar's like, that's okay, I like the rifle I've got here. Administrator tries to show off. He's like, oh, I think I know what that is. Is that titanium? It's like, no, it's Thanagarian. And that's basically Qatar revealing that he's like, backwards, but, like obsessed with Thanagarian history and culture. And the administrator takes off on his wings, leaving Qatar and Shayera to enjoy their hunting trip. So as they wander around the island, they're just going to talk. You get the impression Shayera is just somebody Qatar doesn't want to spend any real kind of time with. He just kind of has to. She seems to be representative of just like everything he hates about Thanagarian society. She doesn't give a shit about anyone other than herself. She's obsessed with new luxuries coming in from other worlds. She takes a shit ton of drugs. They stumble upon another statue. This is Calmore, he's the guy who founded Thanagar, essentially. At least in its current state. Freed the Thanagarians from slavery and then turned them into a conquering army. And he tells all this to Shayera. Shayera isn't particularly impressed. She doesn't give a shit about Thanagarian culture. She just wants more drugs. And then they stumble upon some ape-like creatures that are just foraging. And, they get low for a second. And Qatar is interested at least to know what exactly is going on. He hasn't seen these particular creatures before. But before he can really get a good look at them, Shayera cracks off 4 shots and kills everything she can see. Although Qatar is able to spot one who was only wounded and slunk off to die. So he's going to have to go and find it and finish it off, just to be merciful. Interesting bit here where as he walks off, Shayera gets him in her sights, just kind of to confirm that she could absolutely take him out here if she wanted to. And then wanders away herself because she doesn't give a shit about Qatar either. But again, at this point, it's like they're meant to be together because that's what society dictates. So we're going to follow Qatar, who is tracking the bloodstains. You get the impression that Qatar is a pretty good tracker, which tracks with like the kind of stuff Tim Truman likes to produce. Like one of his biggest things is Scout, which is a Native American character who seems to be like a quasi-superhero. I haven't looked into it too closely yet. I do have a copy of Scout #1, so we might hit that at some point, but I'm not for sure yet if we're going to. So Qatar finds where the animal has crawled off to. It's a big cave in the middle of the plains, follows it in, and finds, where it was headed. So it's just gotten there and managed to die, but its mate is still here with its child. And Qatar has to make a decision. While he's thinking about it, he flashes his light on the wall, realizes that these things are drawing on the walls. They're, producing cave drawings, which means that they have some kind of culture. So they are somewhat intelligent. And naturally, being our hero doesn't kill them at that point. Leaves the cave. As he's going, takes out his Kalmoran medallion, approaches the statue, and just hangs it off of the fingers, just saying, okay, I'm done with that part of Thanagarian society. Kind of like parting with the aristocracy, at least mentally. Nice page to end on here. Like I said, we haven't gotten a ton of really like stunning pages, but this one's pretty good, and it makes you follow the progress here nicely. Striking images. And that's the end of Hawkworld #1. So yeah, very big departure for the character, and mustered up enough interest that they were able to parlay this into a Hawkworld regular series, much like Man of Steel parlayed into Superman, or the Longbow Hunters into Green Arrow, etc., etc. And that ongoing series didn't last for too long, only 32 issues, because Tim Truman was only able to stay on board for a little while, and then, John Ostrander takes over as the writer, so that's okay. I don't know who would have drawn it, though, and I mean, it's tough to keep interest in Hawkman over an extended period, I feel like. Unless you're getting Gerardo Zaffino to draw him on the regular, like this, I think that would do it, but that doesn't seem to be happening anytime soon. And the Hawkworld series continues, where Qatar gets ejected from Thanagarian society, and he starts working in subversion of it, essentially, where he's helping out the downsiders, building up our hero, which is interesting because that's not an approach they would do with every character. I mean, I guess they did kind of do that with Superman, but I'm not for sure if they do. They don't do that with Green Arrow, I don't believe. So yeah, some guys, they keep him going, essentially from the Silver Age. Some guys is like, no, we need a complete rewrite. And he's like, you need to rewrite Hawkman? Yes, we absolutely do. The 70s version of Hawkman does not resonate in 1989. This guy does, though. So yeah, kind of a bleak series, really. I mean, definitely compared to whatever Hawkman was doing before this. And from what I understand, the series takes a couple of shortcuts, but I mean, it is just a 3-issue series, like 3 large prestige format issues at least. But still, you don't necessarily have time to fit in every complexity you want to. And I feel like Tim Truman does a pretty great job of getting into a fair amount of detail about Thanagarian society and producing a sympathetic character out of it. And he doesn't even keep him like 100% squeaky clean. Like, Qatar develops drug problems. There's a bit where he's trapped on a prison world and he murders another inmate that it turned out he did not have to murder. So giving him a little bit of a dark past, I guess, just like not giving him the entirely squeaky clean background, which is probably a good idea, again, in 1989. So yeah, probably one of the best things Hawkman's ever been in, for what that's worth. I think I am going to have to get a copy of the Longbow Hunters at some point and go over that. But for this one anyway, that's going to do it. Thanks very much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like, hit subscribe, hit the notifications so you know when the next one's coming out. Go over and subscribe to my Patreon. Gives you early access to everything I do, from the Blood Force stuff to the YouTube videos before they get uploaded to YouTube, as well as some Patreon exclusive content. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions. And you can join the Blood Force Discord server. But yeah, that's going to do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.